Hi guys, welcome to the channel. This is What If Goku Was in Fairy Tail. Before we start, remember to like and subscribe to help the channel. Also check the description for the creator of the fanfic. Chapter 40. The Red Key Arc Finale, for those about to rock. Checkmate. Flute surveyed the battlefield, towering over the carnage in her stolen body. Kagura lay broken against a fallen tree, her body too shattered to fight. Laxus and Natsu were both covered in burns from crippling attacks, while Urza and Mirajan were laying within slowly spreading pools of blood, which only left Son Goku. The martial artist stood amongst his fallen friends looking very much alone. He was left watching his desperation technique, the spirit bomb, disappear with a twinkle straight through the cloud line. With nothing left, he let his arms fall down uselessly to his side. Flute smiled smugly as she turned to watch the attack vanish from sight, and as a result she missed Goku's subtle shift of his palms to aim them straight down. "Well, that worked a lot better last time," he said with forced cheer. "I'd assume so," she replied, matching his tone. "I must admit that I am honestly impressed. I could feel that attack actually targeting my darker ki. That move wouldn't even affect someone like you or your friends, would it? Such selective targeting, I wasn't even aware such a thing was possible." "Did you create that move yourself?" "Nah, I learned most of my moves from dreams of myself in an alternate life being taught by a series of the greatest masters in the universe." "Fascinating," Flute mused, stroking Makarov's beard. "Have you ever thought of donating your brain to science? Either there is some incredible damage that would make for an entertaining autopsy, or you could hold the potential for interdimensional travel. Either option is quite entertaining. Yet another experiment for me to partake in once I can get your body onto a dissection table." Out of the corner of his eye, Goku tracked a bright blue light rapidly closing in on Flute from behind. "Sorry, but I don't think you are going to get the chance." As the spirit bomb came barreling down on her, Flute smirked. "Of course I will." Then she shrank down to back, flipped straight over the incoming attack. The sphere skimmed the fringe of Makarov's jacket as it blew past her and slammed into Goku head-on. The attack swallowed him whole and dragged him along its path, curving back upwards into the air towards outer space. Flute tracked the sphere, trying to predict where or even if Goku's body might land, but as attack soared higher and higher, it began to slow. Flute raised an eyebrow as it slowly came to a stop before it began to descend once more. The demon cautiously took a few steps away from the slowly moving attack, wary of it suddenly blitzing towards her. But instead, the closer it came to the ground the smaller it seemed to be. Her eyes narrowed as the sphere folded in on itself again and again until the outline of the man inside. The sphere turned transparent as it shrunk down into a pale blue barrier floating a half-inch off of his skin. His skin had taken on a hue that matched the energy he had absorbed, and his irises bled blue. His veins were filled with foreign ki, and his muscles overflowed with energy. But at the same time, "It feels calm," Goku noted, blinking in surprise. "Pardon, my ki, it feels calm. It's like the spirit bomb filled up all my reserves, but it feels smoother than my normal ki. Easier to control. I've never felt anything like this before. My power, it's overflowing. Yes, it's quite impressive. This energy, it couldn't have come from you. What source did you draw from?" Goku smiled and gestured around them to the ruined woods. "The spirit bomb draws energy from the living. The townsfolk, Baba's monsters, my friends. All of them want to see you taken down." Goku smirked. "Their power is inside me now. And you'd better believe I'm going to carry their wills and finish you off." HMPH. "Well, your new power seems to have imbued you with the ability to make frivolous heroic speeches. How quaint. If you are finished, perhaps we may move things along. I don't want to miss grandfather's arrival because I spent too much time playing around with you." "I wouldn't act so confident if I were you. Your body might keep regenerating and your magic might be getting replenished, but your ki isn't. You've done a good job of hiding it, using Lucis and then Makarov's magic as a substitute. I couldn't even tell for a while. But when you were throwing off those huge spells, and when you were fighting Riot, I started to figure it out. You have 3 power sources: your magic, your ki, and your host's magic. They are separate from each other, and you can draw from one or two so that the ones not in use can recover. But they aren't recovering so quickly anymore, are they? You keep healing your body again and again, but it isn't perfect. You're slowing down. That's an impressive bit of deduction for someone like you. You don't seem the type to think things through in such a way." "I'm not really. I just like fighting." "Ah, But knowing that, can you make use of your newfound knowledge? Even in my current position and with your power boost, I still hold the advantage. Goku smiled at that. Tiny flecks of red began to spark up, dancing within the blue hue that surrounded him. That's true, you're still stronger than me. But if you just give me a moment. A moment, Flute smirked. Very well, she was interested to see where this was going, and besides, her grandfather wasn't here yet. She might as well allow the fool to help her pass the time. Simple, he said calmly. It's like I said before, this new key is a lot calmer than what I normally have. Even though my body's already under a lot of strain, I think I can handle this for a little while. Flute rolled her eyes. Honestly, and people accused her of droning on and on. Handle what exactly? Hey, Kaioken. It took a few minutes, but Gray was eventually able to track down Lucy. The girl had been blown halfway across the beach, with most of her lower torso buried under the sand. The ice mage easily dug her out, but now he stood perplexed as to how he should actually go about waking her up. He glanced briefly at the surf before deciding that just tossing her in might just make her condition even worse. Poking her, shaking her, whatever he tried failed to get any sort of reaction out of her. Racking his brain, eventually his gaze fell upon the ruined front of her shirt. An evil smile crept across his face as he formed a handful of ice cubes and dropped them straight down. There was a pause of about 5 seconds before Lucy shot up, arms flailing as she cursed wildly. Damn it, Gray, the hell did you do that for? She snapped angrily before lashing out, trying to slap him across the face. Gray grabbed her wrist with a scowl and spun her around to look at the ruin that had spread across their city. Lucy's face paled and her legs gave out beneath her. Oh no, no, she moaned, clutching at her head. It had to have been a dream. That can't have been real, right? I didn't do all of that crazy stuff to everyone. I didn't attack the guild, I didn't get killed over and over, I didn't hurt Kana. It was all just a bad dream, a really bad dream, and I'm going to wake up any second now and I'll be back home and one of the nutjobs will be breaking in to take a bath or steal my underwear and everything will be fine. Lucy's babbling became faster and higher pitched with each passing second. Aw shit, no, please don't go into shock. Gray shouted and grabbed onto her shoulders in an attempt to steady her. He placed himself directly into her line of sight, blocking her view of the destruction behind her. Hey, he snapped his fingers in front of her face, sending out a gentle wave of icy frost to startle her into looking at him. It's okay, Lucy, just look at me, come on, you need to focus. Damn it, none of it was your fault. But all those people, everyone in the guild, I hurt them all. She said through shaky gasps. Gray saw the beginning stages of hyperventilating and he pulled the girl into a tight hug. Not you, it was that demon driving your body, you didn't do anything wrong. I need you to focus, okay? That demon that possessed you has called for help. She opened a portal with that red key right in the middle of the guild hall and this super demon is going to be coming through any minute. Everyone in the guild is counting on you right now, you're the only one who can stop them. We need you to close the portal, Lucy. You can handle that, right? It's no big deal, a quick jog over towards the guild and a little celestial magic and you saved the whole world. Cool, right? I can't. Lucy bubbled. She threw her arms up around Gray like a lifeline and pulled him into a tight hug. I can still feel her in my head. She's not in me but she's in me. Do you understand? I feel so dirty, and that's not even counting what she did with my body. I can remember everything, I don't want to remember. But I can't go anywhere near her. Please don't make me. Tears were streaming down the sides of her cheek as she practically tried to burrow herself into his chest. Gray gritted his teeth as her hug squeezed some of his bruised ribs, but he didn't let her see his discomfort. Instead, he held her tight. Come on, Lucy. Urza, Mira, Laxus, Natsu, and Goku are all holding her off right now, she's nowhere near the guild. We just have to run in, close the portal, and run out. I'll be right with you the whole time, and then we can go hole up somewhere while everybody else finishes her off. You know how strong those guys are, I'm sure they can stop her without our help. We just need to make sure they don't get blindsided. You want to help them out, right? It'll be okay. Lucy kept her grip on Gray, but he felt her tiny nod against his chest. Okay, that's it, Lucy, perfect. Come on, let's get moving. Gray helped the trembling girl to her feet, checked to make sure that her key ring was still secured to her waist, and began to lead her back up the beach towards the path up the cliff. Halfway towards their destination, the ground suddenly began to shake beneath their feet. Lucy cowered down to the ground, curled up with her hands over her head, whimpering softly while Gray's hands were enveloped in frost as he looked around wildly for the source. Eventually his gaze landed on a massive pillar of swirling red and blue light coming from the site of the battle against Flute. The beam of light reached up and pierced straight through the constant red clouds overhead, much like Riot's had, but with one fundamental difference. The hole wasn't getting any smaller. Riot's hole had closed up almost immediately, but this new one was actually spreading out wider and wider. The red, evil-looking clouds were getting blown away, leaving behind clear skies. All the while, Gray could hear Goku's voice echoing out throughout the mountainside, the distinct roar he unleashed whenever he decided to power up to his absolute max. Shaking his head, Gray helped Lucy back up onto her feet and continued on towards the guild hall. Worst part is, he thought to himself grimly, I can't tell if that means we're winning or we're just getting that desperate. Ha! Flute watched in awe as Goku's red and blue auras gradually bed together into a bright purple that seemed to even dye his hair and even his skin. His irises changed to match, and with a final roar his pure energy from the spirit bomb purged her control over the weather and coloring of the environment. His power was just a few shades lower than Riot's had been, but the source of his power was a far greater threat than hers could hope to be against a demon. As his power settled with the new combination, Goku looked over his changed form in wonder. Huh, not really the Kaioken anymore, is it? What do you think about the Spirit Ken? I hardly think the name matters, it is the performance that URK. One moment Goku had been standing across from her, the next he was burying his fist into her gut, bending her nearly in half. He frowned as she gasped for breath and admonished her. I thought you'd have learned by now, don't let your guard down. Flute's head snapped back up at the teen and a pair of lasers shot from her eyes and pierced him straight through the chest. Goku stumbled back in surprise, coughing blood as he tried to put pressure on the wounds. Flute smiled to herself and allowed Makarov's form to grow to its biggest, staring down at the fighter with a look of contempt. You should learn to take your own advice. You are far too cocky for someone as outclassed as you are. Even as we speak your lungs are filling with blood. How long do you think it will take for you to suffocate? Or, would you rather I just put you out of your misery now so that my experiments can begin? He. Goku chuckled through a blood-red smile. It's a good thing you aim as bad as you fight. You missed my vital organs. All of them, Flute shouted in disbelief. Goku just patted the wounds cheekily and waved at her from far below. So now it's my turn, right? Snarling, Flute responded by bringing down her massive fist towards the teen with every intention to crush him into a fine red mist. Her fist made contact but with absolutely no resistance. Flute stared down as Goku's form flickered around his fist and with a shout of afterimage. She spun around to catch Goku in midair with a lightning-fast backhand. Except, once again her fist flew through his blurry image instead of connecting with solid flesh. Double, she exclaimed before she felt something slam into her knee. The sound of cracking bones echoed around them as the giant toppled backwards onto a cluster of dead trees. The wood splintered underneath Makarov's back, digging into his flesh deep enough to draw blood. A short distance away Goku went through a few stretches as the demon's body repaired itself. Okay, I think I've got a handle on this power now. But we have to be quick, okay? I don't want this burning out before I can finish beating you. You really shouldn't say things like that. It reveals more about your technique than you should allow. In all honesty, wham! Goku was suddenly beneath her head, delivering a kick that slammed her teeth together with enough force to rattle her brain. The demoness stumbled backwards and Goku blurred out of sight as she was disoriented. Clutching her head in annoyance, Flute threw an arm up into the air. Demon's commandment. This time, without any lightning to get in the way, her attack went off unhindered. A beam of crimson light struck her outstretched hand like a lightning bolt, lighting up Makarov's form with her power. Then it erupted straight from his body, sending out a dome of magic that pulverized everything in its path. The flooded woods were reduced to ashes in an instant, leaving behind a smoldering circle of destruction a quarter of a mile across. A grin began to creep onto her face in sight of all the destruction when a flying knee cracked into the back of her head. Makarov's body creaked in protest and Flute noted with dissatisfaction that the pain receded slower than it had before. It seemed they were both on a time limit now. With the Kaioken boosting his abilities, Goku was moving at a speeds that even Jet would have trouble competing with. In a matter of moments he had landed half a dozen hits from every conceivable angle and Flute hadn't even been able to react. In Makarov's giant form, the speed difference was far too vast for the demon to overcome. With that in mind, she shrunk down to Makarov's normal size and allowed her body to be enveloped in his magic. The man had a way of propelling herself along with his magic at far greater speeds than he was normally capable of, and she was going to exploit that for everything it was worth. Goku dodged out of the way as the miniature missile blitzed towards him, lashing out with his foot to try and kick her away as she passed. She managed to duck away from the blow and counter with a thick beam of light magic. The attack actually bounced off of Goku's purple skin and he spun around in pursuit. The two took to the sky, sparring back and forth with beam and fists. The air began to boil under their intensity, sparks flew through the air around them, setting fire to the ground. Goku had never felt more powerful in his life than in this one clash. No other battle had ever gotten his blood pumping like this, had made him feel so exhilarated before. With every punch thrown, with every blast dodged, with every bruise he gained, he felt more and more excited. And he hated it. The fact that a monster like this was giving him the best fight of his life disturbed him. For as much as he wanted to hurt her, to kill her for everything that he had done to all of his friends, his family, at the same time he wanted this to last forever. It was battle lust like he had never experienced before, permeating through every cell of his body with desire. As he dodged a wild hook and returned a barrage of straight punches, he began to feel his energy waver. Regardless of his feelings, his body could only handle the strain of the Kaioken for a few more minutes at best. His muscles were trembling beneath his skin, strained beyond limit. It was only a matter of time before they gave out entirely and he collapsed flat on his face. One way or the other, this had to end right now. Goku batted away a sphere of demon magic before he leapt clear of Flute's range and sunk into a sprinter's ready stance a short distance away. Flute landed across from him and beckoned him on with a taunting wave of her finger. Goku just smiled as he announced his attack. Spirit Ken ×2. Meteor combination. Flute's brain barely managed to process an explosion of violet before an elbow to the jaw nearly snapped her neck. Spots filled her vision, but for her it only grew worse from there. Over a dozen kicks drilled into her chest in the span of a few seconds, punctuated by a spinning kick that snapped half her ribs. A cloud of blood burst past her lips before an uppercut slammed her jaw closed, followed up by a series of punches and kicks all aimed straight at her head. Dazed and confused, Flute was helpless as one final, devastating punch went right up beneath her ribcage, actually bruising her internal organs. The demon collapsed to the ground, weakly clutching her head in agony as Goku leapt up into the sky. As the damned blue light shined above her, and that obnoxious whine filled the air, Flute found that she couldn't even bring herself up to her feet, let alone stand. She was well and truly trapped. Above, Goku agreed. Ka, me, ha. As Gray and Lucy entered the Guildhall, a bright blue light filled the sky. What do you think, Lucy? That looked pretty familiar, right? How much you want to bet Goku just finished the bitch off? He said, smiling at her. Lucy's eyes remained downcast and her expression blank. That didn't work on the last demon he fought, why should things change now? She said in a monotone. Gray grimaced at the lack of life in her expression, but he carried on, guiding her right to the edge of the portal. As long as she could muster the energy to close this portal, they could deal with her emotional issues later. There was still no sign of anything new coming in, so now it was just a matter of making sure it stayed that way. Smiling at Lucy encouragingly, Gray motioned towards the keys resting on her hip. The blonde stared blankly at him for a long moment before her gaze slid down towards the tiny piece of metal that currently dominated her thoughts. A low whine escaped her lips, but she still pulled the ring from its spot. The golden keys connected to her spirits felt empty, just like they usually did when one of her comrades used up their powers entirely and were forced to retreat to the spirit world. The demon had used her lifelong friends to attack her home. Doing her best to keep the bile down at that particular thought, Lucy pulled the red key out and began to let her magic flow into it. The portal began to sputter and waver, and bit by bit it began to close. Then, all of a sudden it snapped back to its full size. Gray frowned and looked Lucy in confusion. The blonde was staring at the key in her hand in a mixture of awe and horror. I can feel them, she murmured. What? Who can you feel, Lucy? What's going on? You can close the portal, right? Is someone about to come through? Is that who you feel? Lucy shook her head slowly. I feel all of them. All of who, Lucy? All of who? The demons. All of the ones Flute had me summon. I can feel them like I can feel it when I summon my spirits. Really? What does mean, Lucy? It means, slowly, like the break of dawn, the fear on Lucy's face began to melt away. It means, her expression grew savage. It means I can make them go home. Go the hell home. She slammed the key straight into the ground, and just like that, the portal winked out of existence. For a brief moment Gray wondered whether she might have messed up, then the circle exploded back into existence, sucking in air with the force of a tornado. The Ice Mage watched in confusion. He could clearly see how powerful the suction was, yet nothing around them, not the guild, not the debris, and not even themselves. But when the first screaming cloud went hurtling past his head, everything became clear. Across the city, every single person that had been possessed suddenly collapsed to the ground as the demons were literally ripped from their bodies. The creatures screamed in agony as they were torn from the world and sent hurtling back towards from whence they came. Hundreds of clouds wiped around Lucy and Gray's heads, driving the Ice Mage to the ground while the blonde just stood in the center of it all screaming. The instant the last of Flute's children vanished, the portal went as well and Lucy slumped boneless to the ground. Gray suddenly found himself the only conscious person within the city limits. As he made his way over towards Lucy to try and patch her up, Gray could only lament the fact that he wouldn't get to see the bottle's end. Flute awoke in more pain than she had ever experienced in her entire life. Every nerve felt like it had been dipped into molten lava, and her skin was a blistered mess. As she blearily looked up, she saw Goku standing a short distance away, glaring at his right fist. The veins in his neck were bulging under his intensity while his muscles painfully swelled. His purple aura began to waver, separating back out into the separate red and blue. The red remained somewhat stable around him, but the blue began to condense, gathering around his fist until there was nothing but a brilliant light shining from within his fingers. He glanced over at Flute on the ground and gave her a cheerful smile. Good, you've mostly patched yourself up. I just wanted to make sure you healed enough that Makarov wouldn't die after I blasted you out of him. Blast me, out of him? She blinked, for the first moment feeling a flicker of true panic. That should have been near impossible, but this fighter, Goku chuckled darkly as he opened his hand, revealing not a sphere, but a cluster of what looked like sparkling dust. Soul Punisher, he whispered as he let the glittering attack fly. Flute couldn't move, couldn't even think to dodge as the attack flew right at her, and then right through her. Inside the man, the demon roared in agony as the changed spirit bomb tore through her insides. Makarov's body, once her fortress, had suddenly become her own personal hell. Makarov himself was completely unaffected by the attack, immune to the effects of the spirit bomb, but Flute was discovering firsthand why the attack had been named Soul Punisher. There was only one way to escape its power that she could see, and with all the speed she could muster she used it. The black cloud exploded out of from the old man's throat and dived straight towards Goku. The teen's eyes widened in surprise and he tried to dodge out of the way, but before he got the opportunity a set of viciously long nails impaled the cloud right out of the air. Mirajan's eyes were bloodshot, the crimson in them matching the red that soaked her clothes and leaked from her body. But her eyes showed none of the physical pain she was experiencing. In her eyes there existed nothing but pure, unadulterated hatred. Elfman, she murmured, gazing at the wriggling cloud of smoke. Elfman is dead, because of you, she shuddered, then her eyes went wide and her voice went icy cold. I'm going to make you feel my pain. Dark power danced up the length of her nails, electrifying the cloud, and in a roar of pain Flute solidified into her natural form. An abnormally tall figure emerged, skinny to the point that it looked anorexic. The ribcage was clearly visible beneath its green skin, and its stomach was sunken in. Pale, tattered wings stretched out into the sky as she patted a deep wound in her chest. Already the wound was closing, it wasn't anywhere near a truly damaging injury. But one thing was abundantly clear to all three fighters. They were all on their very last legs. Mirajan couldn't manifest a fully transformation, stuck in her bartender attire with a pair of arms from her Satan soul. The Kaioken had faded around Goku, leaving behind a weary man swaying on his feet from sheer exhaustion. Flute's regeneration was half the speed it should be, and even with the wounds closed it did nothing to solve the fatigue of the battle. But as she looked at both of her opponents, Flute could tell she was still the best off. Her scaly lips split open into a semblance of a smile, though her jagged, yellowed teeth ruined the effect. With a flap of her wings she took to the sky, her arms up in the air with the back of her palms against her forehead. As much as I hate to say goodbye to a good experiment, I just don't think you're worth the risk to keep around anymore, Son Goku. This is goodbye. Mirajan scowled up into the air and held a clawed hand up near Goku, cocked back behind him in a downwards aiming claw. Unison raid. Now, she grunted at him. An unstable sphere of pitch-black magic was spinning in her palm, wavering and leaking power into the atmosphere with each passing second. Goku looked the ball for a moment before he decided. We'll show her what hell looks like. The girl nodded at him as his palm took up position beneath her own, aimed up so their fingertips were practically touching. A shining blue light mixed together with the darkness, creating a stripped sphere that both illuminated and cast shadows. Above them, Flute's palms had been encased in a thick, sickly yellow light. Both parties reached their peak at the exact same moment, and with all their power they cried out their attacks. Masenko. Unison raid. Hell's End. The two beams collided with enough power to light up the entire mountain range. Yellow met spiraling back in blue, and the three colors mixed together to create a giant ball of energy between the combatants. That thing has enough power to wipe out your entire city. Flute shouted. If only you hadn't resisted, it never would have come to this. In an instant, you forced me to destroy more research opportunities than I've ever had to throw out in my entire lifetime. Flute lamented. But, if I have to, I will make any sacrifice for my family. Flute channeled every last drop of ki she had left into the attack. Her healing came to a halt as she drew from every last source within herself. No matter what, she could never fail her grandfather. The yellow beam suddenly thickened and the sphere between them began to move downwards towards the two fairies. No, Mirajan shouted back, no more, you won't hurt anyone else ever again. Raaaaaaaa. In an explosion of power, the Satan soul form burst to life, fully under her control without any outside influence. Goku grinned at the sight and called up the very last drop of power he had left. Kaioken. The fused beams roared under the massive boost, blasting the sphere straight up into the sky, slicing through Flute's attack with almost no resistance before it crashed into her sonic speeds. The demon had only a moment to cry out before she was eradicated, destroyed down to the very last molecule by the earth-shaking might of the Unison raid. The two teens stood panting as they stared up at the clear blue sky with matching senses of deep satisfaction. Looking down again, Goku held his fist out towards the takeover mage. She glanced down, and when she saw the massive smile on his face, she forced down her anger for just a moment to tap his outstretched hand with her own. Not a minute later, the two collapsed to the ground, totally spent. It didn't matter though, for all the pain they were feeling, they had finally won. Over the next few hours, the inhabitants of Magnolia woke up to find their city in ruins. The corpses of all manner of monster littered the street, buildings were flattened, and spell damage affected every single street. That people had broken bones became the rule, not the exception, and with everything in despair around them, for the most part it was only the mages who even managed to rise to their feet. Though, one mage managed far quicker than the rest. Kana woke up halfway buried beneath a bakery. For the first few seconds she couldn't even remember how she had gotten there, and her mind immediately jumped to her drinking habit as the most likely culprit. Then she climbed out of the building and almost ran headfirst into a Cerberus with only two heads. The third neck had been reduced to a bloody stump, and with that image her last conscious thought came rushing back. Lucy. The girl took off like a sprinter, rushing past everybody on the street, leaping through any collapsed building that got in her path like a parkour champion. She ran straight up to the Guildhall and leapt over the pile of splinters that had formerly been the door. A few other mages who had awoken before her and were milling around, trying to patch up one another's injuries. But her gaze almost instantly fell on the trembling girl who had curled herself away in the furthest corner, with an uncertain ice mage hovering just far enough away to not be intrusive. The card mage deftly tossed Grey aside and threw herself onto her knees, her face inches away from Lucis' own. Lucis' head jerked up at the sudden movement, and for a split second her eyes met Kana's own. Then with a wail Lucy slid down until her forehead was against the ground. Tears rolled from her eyes as she bubbled almost incoherently at the older mage. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," she moaned, not meeting Kana's gaze. "It's all my fault, it hurt you so bad." She let out a choked sob. "I tortured you, then I made you help me do it to everyone else. I swear I didn't mean to, I didn't want to. She was just in my head and I couldn't stop her. I know, Lou, I know. You'd never hurt me if you were in control of yourself, I trust you. Besides, after that crazy demon chick caught me, my memories all kind of vanished. I'm figuring I probably got some kind of super suppression going on right now. So see, now harm done. Kana reached out to try and pull the blonde into a hug, but she shied away. You shouldn't forgive me like that. You can't. I'm a monster and I hurt people. You should be running away right now, not sitting next to me like nothing is wrong. Kana glanced over at Gray, hoping for some sort of help, but he looked just as lost as she was as to how to help their friend. Taking a deep breath, Kana reached out and grabbed Lucy's chin, gently tipping it upward until they were eye to eye. Hey, I think I can choose for myself whether or not you deserve forgiveness. And you know what, I don't even think you need to ask. Nothing that happened was because of you. Heck, the key isn't even yours to begin with. We've had dozens of mages a whole lot more experienced around here for years and they never even guessed that the thing was so dangerous. So stop beating yourself up so much, MK. How? I can't even close my eyes without seeing some sick thing she did to someone I care about. Even if nobody remembers, I still do. How am I supposed to just get over something like that, Kana? What should I even HMPH? Lucy's tearful question was suddenly cut off as a soft pair of lips slid into her own. Gray immediately turned his back and walked across the room to give the pair privacy. After a few moments, Kana pulled back and wiped a few tears off of Lucy's bewildered face. I've got you, Kana whispered. The repairs to the city of Magnolia were set to take months to complete. With so many of their workforce injured, Perliuzica was even convinced to leave her solitude for just a few days to try and tend to some of the critically injured. Carpenters, builders, and metal workers from all across the country were hired to come in and start putting everything back together. In the meantime, a massive tent city was put up at the site of the final battle. The ruined forest provided plenty of clear space for them to set up their temporary inhabitants. Mirajan didn't pay any attention to any of that. She spent the entirety of the first week after the battle in the cemetery, where her siblings now lay side by side. Every day from sunrise to sunset she sat between them in utter silence. Their memories were her only companions. She waited patiently for things to become somewhat settled within the city, for some semblance of routine to return. With Makarov right back in the hospital, she was still the leader. She couldn't afford to just pack up and leave, regardless of how much she might want to. But that 1 week, that was the limit of her patience. The last takeover mage tracked Goku down to a small tent a few miles separate from the rest of the refugees. With his home gone, the fighter had decided to go back further in the woods to keep some degree of isolation that he had enjoyed for the last few years. Though, to her surprise, she found that a few other tents had been set up alongside his own. Gray, Natsu and Happy were all bickering by a small fire pit they had built. A few feet away, Urza and Kagura were completing a new seal for archenemy. The older sword's mistress had wielded high-risk weapons in the past and had learned the art, and after a bit of preparation she was ready to try and pass on the knowledge. Goku sat away from the rest meditating. Mirajan stalked right past the first two groups, ignoring their called greetings, and came to a stop a foot away from the martial artist. Goku's popped open and he looked up at his comrade with a tired smile. Hey Mira, time to go then. The girl's brow furrowed. Excuse me, you want to go after the Dragon Balls again, right? I figured you've probably been waiting for things to settle a bit before we could head out. I've got the balls all set to go in a bag in my tent so we can leave whenever. Fine, you know that we aren't coming back until we've completed the set, right? I don't care how long it takes, we don't go home until they're back. Right. Goku went over to his tent, pulled the bag out and slung it over his shoulder. Mirajan nodded and turned to the rest of the group. You guys will handle things until we get back, got it? Makarov's actually awake for this round in the hospital, so he's going to be getting daily status updates from everyone. After everything that's happened, we can't make things difficult for Master. Her glare was directed almost entirely at Natsu and Gray, who nodded nervously at the girl. With the death of her family, her harsher personality seemed to have sprung up again. They knew better than to antagonize her. If it is all right, I would actually like to come with you, Mirajan. Urza stepped forward. We've already established that spreading out with the balls is more useful to try and pinpoint the other's location, so it could be prudent to bring an extra set of hands. Thanks but no thanks. If I'm not here anymore, you're the only one left that Makarov would trust to try and keep the mob under control. They're going to need to be organized for repairs. What about Laxus? After what happened, I would have thought that he would at least be somewhat willing to help us keep things orderly so that we may rebuild. You would think that, wouldn't you? No, after everything that happened, Laxus got all depressed because the so-called strongest team in Fairy Tail was taken out so quickly without really leaving any sort of important impact on the fight's outcome. He grabbed the rest of his tribe for some sort of giant training trip and promised that he wouldn't come back until the S-Class trials. I think he's planning on getting all 3 of them into the S-Class trial in one shot. You are the only one left capable of ensuring order. Well, if you are sure, Urza said uncertainly. However, we do need to talk right now. Urza's eyebrows shot up at the sudden jump in intensity in Myra's voice. What about? Not here. It's about the fusion, when our brains were all linked up. Just come with me, please. I can't really talk to anyone else about this, Mira said sharply as she dragged the knight off deeper into the woods. Goku watched after them for a moment before he shrugged and turned to begin packing up his tent for the trip. To his surprise, Kagura was quick to copy him. Going somewhere, Kagura? Yes. You are my sensei and are responsible for my training. You are going on a trip, then I am going as well. I still don't have full control of my powers even now, and I cannot progress without assistance. If you do not return for months or years, I shall be set far behind. But what about your brother? I do not wish to leave him, but I cannot keep going to see him. Witnessing him in bed, broken like that, it hurts me. I can't keep doing it, it is agony. At least on the hunt I know that I will be accomplishing something worthwhile. I am helping you restore another family, yes. I'm sure that Simon will understand. The girl sounded more and more unsure of herself with every word she spoke, but Goku just nodded at her and smiled. If she wanted to tag along, she wouldn't say no. Mirajan wasn't likely going to appreciate any attempts at sparing, so at least this way he could have an opponent to work with during any downtime. Ahem. The group looked up to see fortune-teller Baba float into the clearing. I've collected what's left of my creatures and brought them back home. That should help you clean things up a bit faster around here. Good. With how much work there is, anything that I don't have to do is good in my books. Gray said. Natsu quickly nodded in agreement. Glad to help. Now, I'm about to head off to the afterlife to spend the afternoon with my brother. There aren't any dirty magazines in the other world, so I thought he might find some of the ones here interesting. I'm sure I can charge him an arm and a leg for it, hehehehe. But before I head off, I need to speak with you, son Goku. Goku followed the old crone out into the woods, the opposite direction of Urza and Mirajan. As you know, I am a fortune teller. The greatest one alive, and I've seen your future son Goku. I feel, after everything that happened this past week, you should get at least something of a warning. A warning about what? You should have lived in my dimension. You were born there, and you likely would have died there once Piccolo rose to power. But now that you are here, your presence has thrown this dimension's timeline out of order. The longer you remain here, the greater the changes will become until the result is nothing like what had once existed. The most important thing you should know is that no matter what path you take from here on out, the Demon King that destroyed my world is coming. You can change the how and the when, but there isn't a single timeline where you two don't have a fight to the death. As you are now, you could never beat him. If you want to survive, you need to evolve your powers into something beyond your limits. With so many options for his arrival, the timeline is torn beyond repair. Things aren't always going to be what they seem to be, and ripples are guaranteed to occur. Since you are the catalyst of the change, you will be the one who ultimately determines if what happens to this world will bring peace or ruin. But beyond Piccolo, I don't know. There is some far-off threat, something never seen before in this realm, something far before my time that shall arrive in the present. It will bring about destruction on a scale you cannot comprehend unless it can be stopped. But I don't think you can do it. Definitely not as you are now. I see only two paths that can lead to victory. You must either harness the power of a great beast, or access the powers of your kind. Take heed, son Goku, beware my warning or the extinction of life on this world will be on your head. Thanks for listening. If you want the next part of this video, be sure to like, subscribe and comment and hit that bell notification. See you next time.